So, have you experienced this? You prepared hours for an epic battle, but nothing went as planned. Your players attacked during the bad guy's speech, or the bad guy gets one shot, or it just turns into a meat grinder. Well, I have, and here are 3 things that I picked up to make your combat feel more alive. So, you've written your epic speech. And as you are dialoguing as your villain, your rogue starts sneaking. And as the rogue is sneaking, your villain continues stalking, failing his perception check. And he attacks your villain mid-speech. Now you're stuck. What are you going to do? Are you going to interrupt this villain's speech and start combat? Or are you going to ask the player to let him finish what he wanted to say? Here I am offering you a third option, which is sprinkle bits and pieces of that speech into your dialogue. So when it's the villain's turn, maybe his legendary actions, taunt the players, perhaps use parts of that dialogue to, inform them of why he is doing the things he is. So my next tip is about protecting your villain from that fabled one-shot. Let's say your party is 11th level, has a grave cleric and an assassin. Well, let me just tell you, that combo is gonna bip-bap approximately 108 damage in a single turn before your villain even gets to act. Now, that's quite a big problem. How do we stop that? Now, I have a few options in this regard. The first option is actually pretty simple, but this is very tailored to this specific combo, because the rogue needs to surprise your bad guy. This means if the bad guy takes the alert feat, he cannot be surprised, meaning the rogue doesn't get its insta-crit and its damage is halved. Our second option is probably a little more, mean, I would say. This is going to be in the form of a minion wizard that has very conveniently prepared 2 spells, or at least 2 spell scrolls, perhaps more, for your bad guy. And those spell scrolls are Contingency and Otiluk's Resilient Sphere. So Contingency is going to activate Otiluk's Resilient Sphere the moment someone makes a ranged attacks against your bad guy. Meaning, say goodbye to your 108 damage and say hello to an almost invincible bubble around your villain. And then we have our last option, which is of course pulling a Queen Amidala and just using a body double. It's that easy. As for how to make combat more interesting, well, it is all about thinking about what kind of terrain you're using, and it's also a think about what kind of minions your bad guy is using. So let's say you're using a red dragon. Now red dragons, of course, have that nice fire breath. Wouldn't it be neat if all of its allies were immune to fire? So perhaps check into Denizens of the Plane of Fire for its allies. Perhaps it uses, fire elementals, for crying out loud. Some dragons are casters, after all. Now, and also another option is, for example, a necromancer. They raise zombies and other undead. So let's look at the zombie. The zombie has poison immunity and immunity to the poison condition, as does the skeleton and the beholder zombie and almost all undead. So wouldn't it be neat if your wizard is gonna cast Stinking Cloud on the party? It's not gonna harm your undead, but it sure as hell is gonna harm the party. Now lastly, a very interesting part of your fight is going to be the terrain. So are there gonna be any height differences? If you have like a cliff of 15 feet, you can make it so that if you fall down, maybe you don't take that much damage, especially at higher level, but it can take up to a turn or maybe a resource like a spell slot for fly to get back up there in time to be useful in the combat. Play with difficult terrain, play with cover, play with hiding, so every combat feels unique, and most importantly, so every monster feels logical. So what do you think of these tips, and do you have any more? Let me know in the comments and drop a follow for more.